So, making this video just to go through the deck that I took to both European regionals. Our regionals were pre-ban list regionals, which, means that this is slightly less relevant going forwards than maybe it would be for other regionals in the other areas. However, I still think a lot of what's going on here is good. I mean, only one card in this particular list was hit by the ban list. It does mean that, like, the field I was seeing was a different field to everyone else, and but we've got a new set coming out anyway that's going to change things up, and I think a lot of what's going on here is still relevant for that. I'll talk a little bit about what I think I'm going to change going forwards for this deck as well, with the new ban list in mind, and what I think will be good for the future field. So there's two versions of this list. There's only two cards different across them. I did change two things out between Amsterdam and Glasgow. They were 1 week apart, and I ran it for both of those, so we'll get to that when we change. But this was the version I took to Amsterdam. I got 21st place with it. I was pretty happy with that. 5 wins, 2 losses, and a draw. I was 1 point off from the top cut bubble that had happened. There was only one person in that top cut bubble that didn't get in as well. So, could have been a slightly different day if I'd have got one more win, and I would have been in it, right? Because I needed 1 more point. But if I could have pulled a draw or something, maybe I could have been in the bubble. But it was still a pretty good day. I'm pretty happy with it. This deck was tested, but not as tested as I would have liked. The release window for the new cards into the set wasn't or into the regionals wasn't amazing. There wasn't a whole lot of time to practice, and the DCGO simulator literally only got Zafaga Ace the night before, along with the Invisimon and stuff. So it was pretty hard to test the list as I was going to try and run it, and Zafaga Ace was bugged that night as well, so it was hard to get lots of data, but we tested it a fair bit, and I liked the look of it. So I'll go through some of the decisions. As you can see, this isn't your granddad's Imperial list. There's actually 0 Imperial cards, so to call this an Imperial deck is actually, I guess, slightly a lie, because we quit the line before we get there. But I think calling it Imperial still makes sense, considering the low end is entirely from that line anyway. So I think the slightly more interesting things that we've done, because, I mean, you've all seen Paildramon lists before, I'm assuming, so nothing too special there, is the rookie lineup is maybe a little bit different than you'd be used to. I've gone low on searches. I only run 5 searches. It's because this particular list mostly revolves around abusing this Vmon and this Stingmon. So as long as you find one of these two early in the game and you can get into one of your DNAs, if you find both, perfect. If you find 2 of these and 1 of these, then you're fucking, it's game over. But the idea is you build 1 DNA stack, double swing, and then you've drawn ridiculous amounts of cards. You're off to the races. Obviously this Stingmon is now gone. We still have this Vmon. A friend of mine who's also running a similar list to this, we were both testing it in the same locals scene. He was already on 1 of this Stingmon. He before we even knew about the ban list. So it seems still doable. He was getting similar results to me at the locals level. Unfortunately, at the regionals, things went not quite as well for him, but he still did really well, and in the side events he did really well. So I think we'll be okay without this, but he's very much higher on the searches, so I think that's a change that I would probably have to make in a world where we have less Stingmons. But because I was so focused on the card draw, I figured we could probably get away with less of these. The only thing that felt a little bit punishing doing this was actually not the lack of search, it was the lack of end of turn DNAs. So you do have to use these resources carefully, but I otherwise liked it a lot. I mean, this Vmon is a memory printer, it's absolutely beautiful. One thing a lot of people forget is that the second half of its effect says or green. So, start of main, you throw a couple of these boys down off of the dual tamers, and then you drop your Medieval Gallant. Medieval Gallant is reducing cost to 7, and then these guys are refunding some of that. So your Medieval Gallant slams with these guys on the board are super cheap, because I've had it where I've been dropping him for 5 memory effectively, which is not okay. It's ridiculous, because they're both contributing as things that you can suspend and refunding some of that cost, which is just absolutely insane. Similarly, like if you evolve up into a medieval or a Zafaga ace, I mean hard slamming Zafaga ace as well, you're getting refunds. We'll talk about that as well. So like you're getting these insane refunds on half your top end, or a bit over half of your top end actually, both of which are very hard slammable too. So that's why I wanted to keep him at 3. Trash Wormon, this is still in the deck because just recursion is so good. I don't understand why anybody could sleep on this card. I think it's a almost it has to be a 2 of, just because of the fact that you can pull things from trash. If you can get this and Toge Mogumon going as like a little couple, absolutely disgusting. You basically have a blocker forever unless they like waste 2 removal on it, or like you block and then they kill it with something else, like, which again is still I would kind of consider 2 lots of removal. So unless they kind of commit to it, you then just have like this disgusting blocker pair for like the rest of the game, which is really cool. But also just being able to fish out your XV mons from trash, or Sting mons from trash, like, you know, whichever bit you're not finding. Like, this list isn't running Primogenitors, so my level 4s do end up in the trash, I think, more often than a traditional Paildramon list. So being able to like fish them back out, it's so important. So that's sort of the logic there. A bit lower on searches because I didn't feel like we needed them, and then a little bit like higher on these things because of the overall reductions. Level 4 lineup is pretty standard. The only thing I would say is Toge Mogumon is just an absolute beast. A lot of people prefer Lydramon, and if you look at my list, Lydramon probably makes more sense on like a logistics standpoint because it evos for 2 on 11 of my rookies and 3 on 3, whereas Toge Mogumon is the other way around, where it's like 11 of my rookies, it's evoing for 3, and only on 3 of them am I getting the reduced cost for 2. Even with that being said, having a blocker in the deck that can stun and trashes sources is like insane. And if you can get this underneath like a partition, it's wild. Because, you know, think about it, like they do their whole thing, like they swinging at you, they pop your boy, you no longer have like an ace target or anything like that. But what do you have? You have your Chad, Toge Mogumon, ready to block, ready to save you from losing the game. It's just kind of really good. Plus, you know, blue-green, I don't really have to explain why being blue-green is really good in a blue-green DNA deck. It fills the space of either an XV or a Sting. Admittedly, it sucks when it's filling the XV slot. It doesn't really matter too much when it's filling the Stingmon slot. But it's really nice to have that answer. In one of my games, it was actually the only way I could DNA was by using 2 Togemogus, and, you know, I'm glad I had it. If they were both like Sting or XV, you know, there's a chance that wouldn't have been able to happen. 5 lineup, really standard again. You know, we just have the good Paildramons, pretty simple. There is obviously the BT12 Paildramon as like a good choice. As well for additional source strip. I just didn't feel like additional source strip was that important in the current meta, where the 2 best decks in format are Royal Knights and Purple Hybrid, and you're never going to source strip them during your turn anyway. Royal Knights occasionally is source strippable if they've aced, but I mean, honestly, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you're not really getting anything from that. It doesn't really benefit you in any real functional way. Stunning, not important again. Royal Knights is like sucking all their stuff back, so they're not realistically stunned versus you. Purple Hybrid again leaves an empty board on the field every turn, so it just felt a bit like useless for the current meta. It might be better now. With Purple Hybrid out of the way, we'll have to see what kind of comes up, but a stun, it might be useful. We'll just have to see. Top end pieces, you know, these guys are the meat and potatoes of this. Medieval Gallant and Zafargamon Ace. I essentially just replaced dragons with Medieval Gallant and fighters with Zafarga Ace. My previous Imperial list, I think, was something like 3 dragons and 2 fighters, and then 2 Hexablaus. So the real start of it was just to go, okay, well, dragons out for Medieval, fights out for Zafarga, and they work really similarly, except this time, your dragons and your fighters, quote unquote, are like slammable. Instead of just being like top end that you go into, you can just slam them. So like if you have Hail on field and you've just done your double check, your opponent has like a couple of bodies or whatever, you've got like a couple of rookies that have been spat out, you can just slam a Medieval. And now you have 2 ace platforms for your Zafarga Ace, you're basically threatening 4 checks if they don't remove both pieces, instead of like evoing up, and then like a lot of the time if you evo up into a dragon, you're now only threatening like 1 check, 2 if you can get into fighter mode. So you're really like, you're either reducing the amount of checks you're threatening or doing the same. It doesn't really make much difference. So having the option to just like hard slam out huge feels kind of crazy. I'm a big fan. Outside of that, you've got the Hexablow. Hexablow is pretty much just there for purple hybrid, but it is nice in other matchups. Versus purple hybrid, if you get a partition stack and then you slam Hexablow, I mean, I've yet to lose a matchup where I've established that combo. Like, specifically on the partition one. I've lost once or twice on top of this guy, just because you don't have the instant rebuild if they waste a turn killing your Hexablow. But the fact is, like, they pretty much have to pass turn to kill Hexablow using a Rival's Barrage. Obviously, some people are running the other option that's a bit cheaper and can hit your Hexablow eventually. But even that's using up 4 memory minimum, which, you know, late game they can generate, but they don't get to late game versus this. You know, you're putting a lot of pressure on them with your stacks, and you're doing a lot of swings and stuff. So it's been pretty good so far. Like, if they rivals your Hexablow, cool. Just re-jogress, you're still threatening 2 checks next turn. You've removed a tamer, ideally Matt, from the field, so you've set them back 4 memory, and now they have to find another one. And you've also not broken stride at all. You're still just doing your 2 checks every turn. So, and you've basically just completely wasted one of their turns, because they couldn't even play. Well, they can't even necessarily play their tamer the turn they remove you, and if they do, they're putting you to like higher memory, and it's just crazy. You get a Hexablow out, you just absolutely dominate. I think there's a few games on my friend's channel. I can link to those where I've played Imperial into them, like this list. And the games are obviously interesting, but if you want to see like just how strong going into Hexablow versus Purple Hybrid is, that's a good example of a game. Invisimon is absolutely fucking cracked. This event happened on the same day as Worlds. The guy who won Worlds was also abusing Invisimon, funnily enough, so it was very funny to see that they went with a similar sort of strategy. They were on the Galaxy engine. I'd kind of opted for this Imperial engine instead, because I like the idea of every level 5 being able to evo into either the green good stuff or the blue good stuff. Whereas in sort of Galaxy, if you wanted to do medievals with these sorts of guys, you'd have like that weird half and half where like some 5s can go into the red and some can go into blue. I like the idea of everything going into everything and still being able to abuse some of like the best cards in the game, being like Medieval, Invisi, Hexa, Zephyr, you know, like these cards are just cracked. So Invisi is crazy. Generic 3-cost Evo, D-Digi, blow something up. I mean, D-Digi blow something up combined with Source Strip off the Tamers. Like, my guy, you have somebody there who's got like a level 2, a level 3, a level 4, a level 5, and a 6 in a stack, right? So that's 5 cards high. You strip all of this, so it's just a 6 and a 2. Invisimon comes out, de-digivolves them into their level 2 egg. The egg just vanishes due to game rule, and then you pop whatever like next thing they had on the board is that had 1 source or fewer, right? So Invisi on its own, combined with like the Davis from either of these 2 jogressing, you can really kill stuff. And because it's like D-Digi 2 as well, even if they had like an ex-ante style stack where they had like 2 level 4s, let's say, it's like you're doing D-Digi 2. If you can strip 3 of the middle pieces out, as long as the rookie is gone, you can get them down to their egg really easily. Obviously, if you have multiple of these guys out, sometimes that can mess it up, because if you suspend them, you do have to trigger the effect. So unless they had like another stack with sources to strip, like, you know, it doesn't always work perfectly. Sometimes you might have to like opt to suspend this one while going into the level 4 to get the memory, but then like so that later you can only use the source strip once when you do the DNA. So that's another thing, is like even then you can still get the memory efficiency out. You just have to remember the sequencing of like when you go into the 4, suspend a bunch of them to get the memory early. Then when you go into the 5, just suspend one of them, get the source strip, so that when you go into Invisi, you're then killing by game rule, etc. Right? Which is another really great way to get around like protection. Like if your guy is protected from deletion effects, it's like, okay, cool, just strip everything out, so it's just a, you know, whatever he is on an egg, he'll still die to game rule. So have him gone. 3-cost Evo as well. It's really easy to jogress and then still have 3 memory. So you just jogress, do a swing, unsuspend, Evo into Invisi, flip top security, kill something, swing again. Invisi will then get put in your security stack. before the fight happens. So even if the thing revealed is bigger than 11k or 11k or bigger, when the check actually goes through, you're checking as Pale Dramon, who has likely got jamming from your XVs. So this fucker has jamming effectively in 99% of stacks that you're going to build and swing him with. So it's just wild. And yeah, you can do that. You can like do your swing, then you just swap into either Hexablow or Medieval Gallant. Boom, it's nasty. If you go into Medieval, it's even nastier as well, because even if they avoid playing anything and triggering your Medieval, at the end of their turn, if your Medieval is still alive, this dude just plays, triggers your Medieval, and triggers his own on play. Which is just like absolutely disgusting. That combo is nasty. Invisimon actually came up huge for the Royal Knights matchups as well, because you just pop a Royal Knight, and then whatever they play next turn, you just pop that too. The only time it like bit me in the ass was actually in Glasgow once, where I popped the Royal Knight, and then they dropped an Omeka blocker off their cool boy, and then I couldn't swing in and get the chip. So that kind of cost me. However, at the time, they already had one Omeka on the field, so if I'd have picked that instead, I actually still could have done the whole Invisi combo. So that's like one thing to watch out from the Royal Knights matchup, is sometimes if they have cool boy established and you're suspecting the blocker Omeka in hand, or you don't have a way to get through to the security if they do drop a blocker, like you only have the one body, it might be better to kill something that isn't a Royal Knight so they don't get the Omeka spin. Or maybe just don't go into Invisi during that point in time. So the level 6 lineup, super hot. The rest of it, pretty simple stuff. I mean, the Tamers, I think they speak for themselves at this point. People wanted this thing banned anyway, so I think you can understand why I'm running it. This guy is probably the best consistency card in the game for blue-green. Everything is blue-green. He double hits most times you play him, so it's pretty sick. He hits the top end as well, which is nice. Jade memory boost, exact same logic. Hits the entire deck as long as you find stuff. It's great. Ice Wall, restricted for a reason, insane defensive card. It's one of the few ways you can actually interact proactively against things like Purple Hybrid, because you can play it and then know that they will have to pay 2 for every swing. So even if they have a big Tamer lineup and Jack raids for days, like, all right, well, you're still paying an extra 2 per swing on top of the fact that you've got to pay for your full Evo. So, you know, pretty good for that kind of matchup. Now that Purple Hybrid's out, maybe Ice Wall's not as useful. We'll see. Could still be good. I actually did take it out for Glasgow, but you know, it's fine. And then 5 eggs. We got the Demi V, inherited effect. You know, draw 1 if you have green. Demi V if you have jamming, draw 1. I dropped this one for Glasgow because I was actually finding that this egg would sometimes be not triggering for me, but this egg would have been triggering. So, and I never really got to my 5th egg, so I just dropped it for consistency. The main reason I run the green one over this one as well is because if I get to my top end and I swing with that, I would never have jamming as my top end. Whereas having a green body on the field isn't particularly hard. So my top end can still get card draw from it, even when this guy's turned off. That's the basic logic. If we look at the games, you know, I'll drop the links in the description so you can come look at these and read all about them. For Amsterdam, I think I wrote like a semi-decent amount for each one. Glasgow, less so. I was a bit more tired coming out of Glasgow, so I don't remember the games as clearly. But these ones, lots of fun. So you can see my matchups. Had Imperial, Vemon, or Galactic, or whatever you want to call it. Virus Imperial, Purple Hybrid, Raw Knights, Purple Hybrid, Cross Heart. I mean, this match was insane. I cannot tell you how much fun this match was. But these were the matchups here. Not too much to talk on, other than that, like, you know, I think Hexablow is way better for fighting things like Purple Hybrid, but now that that's gone, I think you could probably just swap these for Invisimons, because Invisimon actually does work quite well versus things like Raw Knights. And Hexablow, I think the value of Hexablow has gone down a lot in a post-Purple Hybrid world, especially because Red Hybrid also got hit. Maybe if the adventure decks are as good as I believe they're going to be, you might need Hexablow still. Who knows? But I do think Invisimon will be a good counter to adventure as well. So we'll just have to see how that works. Because they run a lot of aces, so de-digivolving the aces is going to be pretty big. And they hard slam a lot of stuff as well, so they have low source count, which is also good for this guy. So we'll see. More testing needs to be done. I'm I mean, I'm pretty sold that Adventure's going to be cracked, but I know a lot of other people aren't, so we'll see how it goes. So that was my 21st place Amsterdam run. Had a great time. It was a really good event. Glasgow, we make a couple of changes. We swap the Ice Wall for an Omni X. Kind of surprised I didn't think about Omni X before. It's just a fucking insane card. And it evos on everything but Zafarga Ace, because Medieval Gallant is part red. It's disgusting. It does way too much. It's way too generic. Why not run it? It felt decent. It did win me a few games that I otherwise maybe wouldn't have won, because, you know, just ending the game a turn sooner and not giving them the chance to make a comeback is good, whereas Ice Wall doesn't really do that. Yeah, it's wild. Absolutely cracked card. I don't know there's much to say on it. A cool thing as well, if you had multi-stacks and you evo this on one of your stacks, you can just make like the Paildramon swing again, and if it has like a bunch of card draw stuff under it, you can just draw a shit ton more cards. If like you're just swinging for a check and it, you know, you don't need to raid over something. So that's pretty funny. The list pretty much the same, just drop the egg for consistency, swap that. Other than that, you can tell the main flaw of the day was that I saw a lot of Royal Knights. I think one of my Royal Knights matchups at the end could have been winnable. One of them was a hard brick. I didn't see XVmon in the entire best of 3, so... You know, some will say maybe if I ran more searches, I would have found XVmon. I will say I barely saw rookies as well, so... It is what it is. If you're breaking into Royal Knights, you die pretty quick. You don't have a lot of time to, like, unbrick. It is what it is. Like, I even Jade Mem boost and still missed things. Like, wasn't finding the XVs anywhere. So, I don't know that it would have been much better. And then another one was that mistake I made when I mentioned the Invisimon killing the wrong target. Maybe cost me the game. Annoyingly, if I'd have won that last game in the best of 3, which there's no guarantee that my misplay cost it for me, but annoyingly, if I did win it, I again would have been in the top cut bubble. And I think looking at my tiebreak score, it was a pretty good chance of being top 16. So we got pretty close in 2 games, and we were almost top 32 in both. So I'm pretty happy with the results. I was kind of worried that losing Primogenitor would be too bad and that the deck wouldn't perform, but like honestly, I barely missed Primogenitor, I won't lie. Like it was kind of insane. Like with your level 6s being so hard slammable, like it's kind of hard to like truly brick. Like I was winning games that I think if you were playing normal Imperial would have been like a hard brick loss, because you're slamming a Medieval, you're slamming a Zafarga, and you're just like removing things. Like both of them have Vortex, both of them have good removal effects built in. So, you know, like there were a couple of games where I wasn't finding a level 5. So I didn't really have much play. You know, if you're not finding your 5s, you can still play the game, but you're probably not going to be in a very good position. But because of these 6s, I was just able to bridge that gap, keep a bit of board control for like 1 or 2 turns. I wasn't making a ton of forward momentum, but I was completely stopping their forward momentum while I waited for my 5s to show up. Which, if you're on a more traditional build, just wasn't happening. Like, you can't slam Fighter Ace, really, because it requires sources. You can definitely slam Zafarga Ace. It doesn't care. And you can bottom deck more shit. It's absolutely disgusting. You know, I had games where I was kind of bricky. I managed to establish double Medieval Gallant on board. You basically buy yourself all near infinite time at that point. Like, you have like 2 to 3 turns to just find stuff. It's insane. So I think this deck is a bit more resilient to bricking. I mean, it does still happen. Obviously, I just told you about that Royal Knights game. I think Royal Knights is a little bit different because they're quite difficult to get good value by hard slamming your 6s against them. Because of the nature of all of their on plays, like whatever you hard slam is just going to get killed by their hard slam immediately afterwards. But against anything else, like these things are very hard slammable and do they're I mean, they do the Lord's work. It's really crazy. I'm pretty happy with it. I think I've made some interesting decisions, such as with the rookies. I think this lineup looks very different to what a lot of people run. The top end, obviously, pretty interesting. I'm a big fan of it. I would really love to try the other DNA decks, the other like dual tamers. See if you can make some disgusting like Toolshed style decks with them. I think it's probably less possible because the BT12 level 6s really make this deck super memory efficient, and you have a million end of turn DNA effects and just a million good cards and double swings and jamming and all these other things that make this deck way better than the other ones. But yeah, I think it'll be really good. And I think going forwards, the main thing is just you drop a couple of these guys, probably put in one more of this, and then maybe the BT16 Stingmon as well. Or just two more of this to replace the one that you've lost. Kind of like the BT16 one as an idea as a one-of, just because it gives you a little bit of flexibility with the retail. You like suspend, gain retail, swing in. That could be really big. I think versus like things like Royal Knights, that could be nasty. To just like have that weapon to just like blow something up. We'll see. And I think like, yeah, just like upping the Invisimon ratio now is going to be a big one. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.